We find that there is a distinct difference between the South Indian experience and the North Indian experience, because in North India the republican states had their existence for a long period of time, but in South India we seldom find reference of republican states. From the Ashokan scripts, inscriptions, we find names of references of some ruling lineages in plural, like the Satyaputtas or the Keralaputtas. And in Sangam classics, which is considered to be the earliest stratum of the Tamil literature or language, there also we find reference of Tolkudi, that is the old people, but these were not the kind of republican states that we find in north. And to explain this phenomena, T.V. Mahalingam, who was a very eminent noted historian of South India, he tells that this is precisely because of, among many other factors, the predominant factor was the variegated nature of the geographical locale of peninsula. It was divided into many parts. People were divided, they were very far stretched, and to protect themselves from the attacks of the robbers or from the foreign invasions, they needed a very strong government, which was given by the monarchical states. Even though the monarchical state was very important, or it was the predominant feature of the polity in South India, but compared to say Roman experience, again T.V. Mahalingam says that it was very different from the Roman Empire, because in Roman Empire we find the imposition of a lingua franca all over the Roman Empire, Latin, and imposition of a unified legal framework structure that we do not find in South. There the locality was also very strong, and there was a peculiar interaction between the central forces and the local forces, where barring the instances, barring the rule of a few very powerful monarchs, the centrifugal forces were that very dominant. Now, keeping this as our dominant feature of the South Indian polity, if we focus into the particular zone and particular time frame, that is between circa 600 to 900 AD, we find that there was the emergence of three cornered contest, three very important, very powerful kingdoms, one on the northwestern side of the peninsula, that is the Vatapi Chalukyans, then on the south, a bit southeast portion, it was the Pallavas of the Kanchi, and far south it was the Pandyas of Madurai, which emerged almost contemporaneously between 5th and 6th century. there were 4 distinct phases as found from the epigraphical sources, 4 distinct phases of the Pallava polity, Pallava monarchy, but we will be taking up because of the time frame that we have taken up, we will be focusing mainly upon the Simha Vishnu line which goes on up to Parameshwaravarman II, and then after his untimely death in a battle, the throne was usurped by a person from a collateral branch, that is the Nandivarman II, who was also known as the Nandivarman Pallava Malla. We will be focusing mainly on these 2 lines of the Pallava dynasty. Then we will be focusing on the Vatapi Chalukyans, but by the time of Nandivarman Pallava Malla's reign, when it was coming to an end, already the Chalukyans, they were eclipsed by the rise of a new dynasty, that is the Rashtrakutas, and by the same time the resurgent Pandyans, now they were also under the leadership of Rajasimha. He was trying to penetrate the southern portions of the Pallava kingdom. We find that the dominant feature of the political development was a continuous struggle between primarily the Chalukyans and the Pallavas, where the Pandyans, though not a second fiddle, they were also playing a very significant role in the development of polity. If we take the instance of the Mahakuta inscription of Mangalesh, who was the regent of after the death of Kirtivarman, taking the place, because Pulakeshi II, he was infant by that time. Mangalesh's inscription, the Mahakut inscription, actually refers to the incipient struggle which was beginning, because there is a reference is there that they have defeated, he has defeated the Dramila Chodyas, which means that they already have started infiltrating into the deep south, where later the Pallavas tried to infiltrate. Now, if this was the situation, then the second ruler after Simha Vishnu, Mahendravarman II, who was very famous because of his many faceted genius, his rule was notably peaceful, which was devoted to other peacetime activities like poetry, temple building, etc. But the successor, Narasimhavarman Pallava Malla, we find that he actually defeats, kills, possibly he had killed Pulakeshi II, and he had occupied Vatapi, which gave him the epithet, the title Vatapikonda, that means the conqueror of Vatapi. Later, during Parameshwaravarman, it was the time for the Chalukyans to take a revenge, and Vikramaditya, he attacked the Pallavas consecutively and possibly occupied Kanchi. Though there are references in Kurram plates, copper plate inscription of the Pallavas, that he was defeated, his forces were forced out from the country, Pallava country, but the struggle went on with almost monotonous regularity. The situation, a new factor was added when the Pandyans also started taking interest, and when Parameshwaravarman II, he was killed by say 728 AD, and there was considerable confusion of succession in the Pallava throne, when Vikramaditya was actually espousing the cause of Chitramoy, who was the ruler of the Parameshwaravarman lineage line, then a person from a collateral branch, that is Nandivarman II Pallava Malla, he came to throne, he ascended the throne, but he was belly-augured, he was heavily under siege, which was raised only by the able assistance from his general Uday Chandra, and it was only because of the exertions of Uday Chandra that finally Nandivarman II Pallava Malla could ascend the throne. but it does not mean that it was only a blank sheet where the three powers they were playing between themselves. There were many other minor feudatory chieftains who also assisted different groups, different dynasties, and they also played a very significant role in the development of the political struggle. Now, if we take the monarchical system as the predominant feature, obviously the role of the king becomes the most important one, and there we find that the king was ruling, and generally the rule was of hereditary succession, though it will be very difficult to say that primogeniture was the predominant rule, because the history shows this of this period shows that there were several shiftings, there were several changes within the succession. For instance, when Kirtivarman dies, Pulakeshi, as he was an infant, the kingdom, the charge of the kingdom was given to Mongolesh. But when Pulakeshi attained the age, Mongolesh was not ready to deliver the kingdom to Pulokeshi, and this led to a kind of struggle in which it is said that the public opinion was in favor of Pulokeshi and he could defeat Mongolesh. But when Parameshwarvarman died, then altogether a new person from a collateral branch, Nandivarman II Pallava Malla, he usurps the power, he takes the power, and this we can find from the temple frieze of Vaikuntha Perumal temple, where a kind of partition statement, because the temple was built by Nandivarman II Pallava Malla, and obviously it was Nandivarman II Pallava Malla's version which was taken care of, which was given the credence while making those temple friezes, which shows that the person comes from a far away place and acquires the throne, though there was a rival claimant, that is Chitramoy, whose cause was espoused by the Chalukyan king. So, hereditary succession, yes, but primogeniture, it will be a question mark. When the king ascends the throne, he usually took some high sounding titles, which was the general feature of the early medieval period. For instance, the Pallavas, they used to assume the title of Maharajadhiraj, but it is not just the simple title of Maharajadhiraj, but there were several other things. At the time of coronation, they were generally conferred with a new title which was known as the Abhishek Nama, and then there were several other titles which were known as the Birudas, and it is said that some of the Pallava kings, they had titles ranging to hundreds of names, titles, and then lastly there were several titles which they got because of their activities, because of their success in battle. For instance, when Pulokeshi II could successfully stall the invasion of Harshavardhana, he was given the title, or he took the title of Parameshwara. So, the general title of the Chalukyan king, Sri Prithvi Vallabh Maharaja Dhiraj, was then it went through a slow accretion in which these later titles Parameshwara and Parambhattarak was later attached to the title, and that gives us the whole title of Sri Prithvi Vallabh Parameshwara Parambhattarak. In the case of the Pallavan kings also the same thing happens. There was a very long title that was given to them. Now, when the king is ruling, he is being assisted by a battery of functionaries, the councillors or the ministers. The picture is not very clear, but there are references in the inscriptions, Pallava inscriptions as well as the Chalukyan inscriptions, where we find references of some prime ministers or chief ministers. Name of a particular person number appears in the inscriptions of Nandivarman II, and it is said that he is the scion, he is a successor of a very illustrious minister who was possibly the minister of a very early Pallava king, and it shows that the ministership, the chief ministership or the prime ministership, actually goes through a kind of hereditary succession, something like the king's succession. His ministers also came from the same family. But it is not just the prime minister or the chief minister, but there are several other functionaries whose name also or the titles also appear in the inscriptions. For instance, in the Pallava inscriptions as well as in the Chalukyan inscriptions, we find reference of a title Rahoshadhikrita, which means a kind of close confidant who generally used to take notes of the royal orders which were proclaimed orally, and then it was committed to writing, and these written instructions are found in the inscriptions. Now, from the Chalukyan inscriptions, we find the name. It was the general practice that the copperplate inscriptions at the very end generally used to write the name of the person who has committed the whole inscription, who has committed the whole order into the written form, and there the title like the Sandhi Bigrohik appears in the Chalukyan inscriptions. Positively, this Sandhi Bigrohi, who was the person in charge of warfare as well as peace, a kind of role that the modern foreign ministers would assume, these persons were responsible for committing the royal order, oral order, which was generally known as the Kon Olai, into the written format. These people, they assisted the king or played a very significant role, as it is very clear from another title which also appears in the inscription known as Agnapti. Agnapti are those people who take care of committing or translating the king's orders or his wishes into action. So, these people, the Rahoshadhikrito, the Sandhi Vigrohi, they were playing a significant role as the ministers. The kind of secretariat, a kind of body which assists the king, as we find in the subsequent Chola period, is absent from the Pallava or the Chalukyan inscriptions, but it is very certain that some people, they were assisting the king and king depended on them. Now, apart from these Sandhi Vigrohi, we find the minor poets who were writing the prashastis for the king. They, for instance, in Tandantottam inscription of Nandivarman II, name of the person who wrote the verse, Sanskrit verse, his name is given Parameshwara Uttarkaranik, who is the son of a Paramuttarakaranik. Karanik, in charge of Karan, that is the secretariat, name appears, and from the title Karanik, Uttarakaranik, Paramuttarakaranik, it shows that there was a kind of hierarchy of the functionaries. There was a kind of succession, or there was a kind of role division in which from the lower rung, that is Karanik, then we find Uttarkaranik and finally the Paramuttarakaranik. It is notable that in the Tamil country, the person, the village accountant, his title is, his official title is Karanam, and possibly this Karanam comes from the Karanik, that is, who is in charge of the secretariat or the ministerial, at least the scribal functions of the state. So, these are the two things, one king and another his ministerial support. If we go into the nitty-gritty details of how actually the administration was running, then we find that as the king is the fountainhead, he issues the order, an oral order, and then it was taken down by his close confidant, whom we have already referred to as the Rahoshadhikrito. And in the Pallava inscriptions, we find another kind of title which is known as the Wild Kelpar. This Wild Kelpar, some of the historians, they say they are very close or almost identical with the later, during the Chola period, the later reincarnation maybe of Thiruvai Kelvi. Or say Tirumandira Olainayagam, but we are not very confident about the relationship, the identical nature of these two persons. But anyhow, the royal order emanates from the king, it is transformed into writing, it goes to the locality, as I have already said that it is now addressed to a particular person, Nattar Kanga, and then he takes the follow-up action of removing the old inhabitants and giving it to the Doni. For doing these things, one thing should have been done at the very outset was detailed land survey. it is very clear from some of the informations gathered from the Pallava inscriptions that a kind of survey of the village land it was done. For instance, in the Uruvapalli grant, there it is said that the particular village it has 200 nivartanas of land, and then a detailed mapping, obviously in words, is given in the inscription. The land lies on the south of this, there is a river, on the north there is a kind of hillock, and this follows. The map of the particular land that is mentioned to in the Uruvapalli grant can be found in the book written by C. Meenakshi, and from there we can have the feeling that what kind of detailed instruction is being given, a kind of mind boggling instruction which is emanating from Kanchi and goes to the locality, but the king knows the every detail of the land, what lies to the south, what lies to the north, what lies to the east, and so on and so forth. So, this kind of detailed land survey was one of the very distinctive features of the administrative setup, and this gave the king the knowledge about what kind of land that he was administering. There were several other features also that shows that the royal administration, though almost all historians accept that the central force, central power, the ruling dynasty was not that very invasive in its nature and left many things to the local initiative, but even from the inscriptions of the Chalukyans also shows that whenever there was a dispute, whenever there was a kind of problem arising, the central government obviously had to intervene. They intervened, and then their word was the final decision on the basis of which the local administration went. So, it will be very difficult to say that the central government stayed away, like the later historians like Bartonstein and other people say that there was a kind of hiatus between the central government and the local administration. Later we will see how the local administration, first the administrative divisions and later the administrative the provincial as well as the local administration, how it was functioning, that we will see later.